What are the most common assumptions, mistakes, or challenges that I see a lot of startup founders struggle with when I run my one-to-one session, whether it's on product validation, building an MVP, growing a tech team, or the likes. This episode was kind of an inspiration to me, as for those who don't know, about a month ago, I've joined the Founder Institute leadership team to really dive in and support a fantastic cohort of about 30 plus startup founders. And of course, it's great to be working with Founder Institute. It's one of the global accelerators, one of the leading global accelerators in the world. And what I love about them as well is that they focus on pre-seed startups, early stage pre-seed startups. And personally, that's where I believe that, founders out there have a lot of ideas, a lot of energy, but they just might need a bit of direction. So how can I help them? And more importantly, how, based on the just about 1 month I've been working with Founder Institute, what are the most common things that I've seen, so that if you are not part of an accelerator or you do not have an advisor, you can actually check what you're doing and keep going. Welcome to the Mary Poppins of Startups live show. I'm Naily Makangu from Athena Leaders. As a tech consultant and startup advisor, I will answer live the burning questions that you have on your way to Series A+. Subscribe and tune in every week for top tips to meet amazing guests, startup founders, investors, and more. More importantly, sit back, relax, and enjoy the show. The first thing I really want to look into when we start looking at common assumption is actually the assumptions that startups make. And you might be thinking, what does it actually mean? Let me tell you the one thing. Your ideas are just guesses. Your potential solutions are just guesses. And even the problem that you think is the main problem, of the root cause problem of your clients, are just guesses, especially when you are in early stage or when you are building a new iteration or new feature in a product. Until you've tested it, you've validated it, you've spoken to people about it, you really spend time to not just on your own think about the problem, but really talking to others, you need to treat them as guesses. And people make a lot of assumptions. So, how do I identify the assumptions? Well, this is one of the questions people ask me. Sometimes when I work with founders, it's easier to think about assumptions based on the product, but sometimes you need to kind of go a bit wider. I had someone that wanted to build a product that will, this a B2C, an app that will help a certain user target market. So the question will be, why did you pick that target market? In one of the workshops that I run, I'm actually running one this week, where I really help founders with especially the beginning of product validation. I used a case study called Alexandria, an app that will target digital nomads, for example. And it sounds perfectly fine, but then as a startup, one of the first assumptions is that digital nomads have a problem when it comes to connecting and finding books in English, right, in other countries. You don't know what you don't know until you start testing it. Think about the market readiness. You might say that it's an innovative product, right? Especially those who want to bring VR and AI and all of those things. They are just buzzwords. What are the real problems that people are having? And is the market ready for your solution? Think about things like this, as the Segway. Segway is such a brilliant invention, but the market wasn't ready for it. And in fact, some of the technical aspects, or not even technical aspect, the day-to-day lives of individuals that might have wanted a Segway, because I think it's pretty cool and absolutely love it. But on a day-to-day, is that something that I really want to use to navigate traffic? Yet, when we look at the bikes and other things that we have at the moment, they actually fit better for transport. So it's really important that when you are thinking about assumption, you really challenge absolutely everything. Work with your teams, your friends, and whoever, even ask your potential clients. Turn every idea or guesses into a question, and that will really help you to start coming up with this idea of getting a list of assumptions. And of course, if you are interested in understanding how do I go from assumptions to experiments, understanding more about, obviously you can't validate all of the assumptions, but how do I identify the risky one to validate, then do get in touch with me, because I'm running those sessions regularly. So you can come in a group of 8, 10 maximum, if I can just squeeze them in, so that we can really give you those skill sets. Focusing on the solution versus the problem. And that's another thing that I see a lot. Again, this is completely normal. When you start working on an idea, you spend so much time with it. You dream about it. You go to bed thinking about this. Sometimes one thing that we lose is that we focused on the solution. When, especially in the beginning, again, it could be the beginning of a startup or a new idea, a new product line, or a new feature, you really want to spend as much time as you can in the problem space rather than the solution space, right? I've had people who start with a solution, and sometimes the solution is based on their own experience, is based on what they really want to achieve. But it's a bit like, when they say you use a hammer for absolutely everything. So if you start with a solution and your solution is a hammer, you'll want to use that. If for those who cook or enjoy cooking, you might just have one big knife that you use for fish, for chicken, and also for smaller items like an onion. But when you go to a chef's kitchen, you have different size of knives for different purposes. So when when you are in a startup or thinking about an idea and validation, and when you fixate too much on the solution, you might go blindsided in a way, because you are not going to appreciate other problems that people have, because you want to kind of redirect everything into the solution that you have. And the second thing to bear in mind when it comes to the problem is that you need to go out there and ask the questions. Why? If you think that this is a problem, if you think that you kind of nailed it, then get people to go much deeper. Most of the time when we have a discussion, we say the first thing that goes into our minds, but when you go why, the 5 whys, you keep on going why is our target market suffering with this, and why this particular thing and not something else, that will move you forward. One of my favorite assumptions and or misconceptions is actually the minimum viable product, MVP. That word means anything and everything to everybody, and that's one of the word, the terminologies, and the likes that I believe people can really benefit from or can be burned from. But what do I mean? The first thing to bear in mind when we look at MVP is that it's not a point in time. So I get a lot of people that ask me that, that come to me and says, I've got this product, I'm ready for my customer to start using. This is the first MVP I've built. And if that's the first MVP you've built, then you spend way too much time building without going out there and letting people know what you're doing, or even testing the market. If people are ready to start using what you've built, you beyond, where you should have started. We start looking at first version of a product or even a more mature MVP. Of course, there's going to be so many terminology in between. I'm going to skip over that. The reason why I say that, and the way I help my clients, is to think about MVP as a series of experiments. Going back to the idea that when you first start, everything is a guess. When we look at MVP as a series of experiments, you can really start your MVP from the beginning. The other way I like to break that up is pretty much idea, build, test, right? So you have an idea, going back to the assumptions, you have a list of assumptions. How can you test this assumption? And what is the minimum amount you can build so that you can go out and test the assumptions? So if you go back into that series, you'll see that an MVP can start with something as small as a validation of a feature, which is what the MVP should be, a validation of, not even just a feature, I mean, the validation of an assumption, an idea. It's something very specific that you test, that you come back. And the way you do the build will change over time, going from just surveys, interview, prototype, drawing on paper, to no code, and eventually building something. So MVP is a process, right? It's a journey. So when you are thinking and you are at the early stage of your startup, think about, in terms of a roadmap, if you'd like, a series of experiments that you are going to run. Even if as you're starting the next cycle of experimentation, you might tweak a little bit, but that will help you as you move forward. And once you get to this point where you starting to flesh out the platform, is the same idea where you build a roadmap of what are the main features and why, knowing that things are going to change. So keep it very high level to give you a direction and to also continue to be agile. But please do remember that MVP is just a series of experiments that you take along the way. And for those who might be struggling with their MVPs, or maybe you're starting building a product and things are not launching for whatever reasons, then I will ask you that you check out episode 37 on this podcast, where I talked about why your product is not launching, because that could help you as well get a little bit more unstuck. And as I said, I'm here to support you. If you have any questions, just put them on the chat. Love to find out more about what you do, and I always answer, whether directly to you or live on another show. And do remember as well that we run our monthly one-to-one tech and product mentoring, where I sit with you, understand what you are working on. Again, this is nothing. It's nothing to do with Founder Institute. It's something that I've started a while back, but the benefit that you get is incredible, because you can keep on moving forward and then join the community. Stop building. That is another big assumption or a big misconception when we start looking at validating a product or an idea. And one of the things that I've done a lot, especially ever since I've joined the Founder Institute as part of the leadership team, I keep on asking people to stop building. It's actually incredible, because, as I said, this year we've got about 30 startups, and every week I'm available to them to come for one-to-one sessions. And I've done over 2 weeks, I think I might have done 15 or so. And the number of times I've asked people to stop building, let's take a step back. Let's go back to the assumptions. Let's go back to the problems. How have we spoken to others out there, or how much you understand the pain points? And why are you building if you do not understand the pain point of your problems, right? And I think stop building, especially for someone who's, I'm a software engineer by trade, and I absolutely love coding. But I know that to be able to build the best software, you need to have the right foundation. And the more you build, the more you add complexity that will slow you down as you go forward. You might say, well, I'm doing it on my own. I'm a tech founder. Great. But the amount of time that you're investing in building will slow you down, because you will still need to learn about the market in the future. And if you're a non-tech founder and you say, well, I'm using no code, exactly the same. The amount of time that you're investing understanding no code and then using it to build something, when you could have found different shortcuts to be able to move forward, at least in terms of the validation, making sure that people really want this idea, that people will pay for it and the likes, and only building enough. And I repeat, only build enough for the stage you're at, which is why I go back to this idea of experimentation, so that you always answer the question, now that I'm going in the cycle of the next experiment, what is the little amount that I need to build in the quickest way possible, so that I can test my idea? If I built it, they will come. That's something that, over the last 10, 15, even 20 episodes, I keep on talking about that, because it's something that I see a lot of people struggle with. And I completely appreciate it. It's much easier. I'll say easier than another word. I would say it's much more engaging to build a product than to go out and do things like business development, sales, or marketing, or even trying to get people to speak to people, if that's not your background. And again, for those who know me on the podcast, I will tell you, I have a lot of respect for marketing and sales. It's like, like a black box. And I would actually prefer programming when others will think the other way. But the idea that, you fall in love so much with your baby, with your product, and you know that it's going to solve a problem out there, Great. But there's another aspect you need to consider: users' behavior. Why will someone stop what they're doing to learn something new? Learning a new tool affect productivity at the beginning, even if you're going to move further. People, there are tons of apps there. If I'm already used to an app, why would I change to yours? How would you know that trigger that will move people in a certain direction if you don't speak to them? When we talk about this idea of speaking to people and making sure that people are out there understanding you, you also need to think a little bit about that, not just for when your product is launching, but all the way back from the beginning. I have a lot of people that want to go out for surveys, interviews, and says, well, I send a link to 5, 10, 20 people and they didn't respond to me. Or I put it on this website and they didn't get any feedback. But the question, again, it goes back to, how did you promote that? How did you engage with the people so that they know that you're coming? It's not just about being passive. You can have a landing page, but if you don't bring traffic to that, how are you going to get the results? So that's why it's really important, again, when I go back to this idea, build, test, to really thinking about the testing part of your experimentation. What are the success criteria? Or let's say in another way, the moment when you know that you've got the result that you want to go in one direction or another. So that's why it's really, really important to think about, even when you're building, or even just before you're building for an experiment, to think a little bit about, how am I going to test this area? Where I'm going to get the people just for this? And how am I going to approach them? What kind of whether it's even just a one-pager or a video or whatever you want, what can I create to be able to get to them? And please stay away from believing that is the right thing to do. We all know that exercising a lot is healthy. We all know that sleeping early helps with our brain. We all know to eat well. But how many people do not follow the thing that we know universally that will help our own health? So you cannot just assume that because we are moving into this sustainable, more conscious world in terms of the way people buy and use products, that if that's part of your messaging, people will stand up and want to do it. There is a lot of work involved, and that's why it's important that whether we're talking about a version of an MVP that can be used, or at the very early stage of experimentation, you know that if you built it, you need to let them know so that they will come. So I hope that so far you kind of understand a little bit to some of the challenges that people are having when it comes to building a platform, or you've started working and you're startup founder at early stage, or even a little bit beyond. And if you reflect on a lot of the things that we've talked about, that will already get you unstuck. And of course, you might be wondering, well, I'm not part of an accelerator program and I'm struggling. What do I do? So if that's you, then definitely I will ask you to subscribe to this podcast, because I bring a lot of guests and I share a lot of information on the podcast, on my blogs, and on social media, because I believe that knowledge should be shared. And I believe that going through an entrepreneurship journey is really hard and you might feel alone. So why feel alone when you can join a community? So if you are enjoying the advice and you're enjoying the sessions with me, please make sure that you subscribe and that you also share and like my episodes so that the channel can grow. And of course, it's a little bit of a thank you for everything that you are getting from just being in this moment with me. And the second thing that you can do, put your questions either on LinkedIn when you find me there, or on YouTube, or whatever platform, as I aim to answer questions live, so that if you've learned something from this episode, or there's something that you're not quite sure about, put a question. In the next one, I will give you a little bit more to move forward. Right? So we talk about asynchronous communication, and this is an asynchronous way to learn. So if you are struggling, not part of an accelerator program or whatever programs that help startups, that's the way to do. Another thing that you can do is to create a mastermind group with other founders to support you, right? Think about, if you are working rather than struggling alone, work with other founders. You can meet every week or every 2 weeks to update each other. You might not have the technical knowledge in a way to maybe build a platform or do the things that I could be advising you on, but at least you will get the accountability and the support so that you can keep going. You can get people to really challenge and question you. You can ask them to work with you on your assumptions for your business or review some of your plans. A strong mastermind will help you going further, even if you don't have a part of an accelerator. The third way, of course, will be to look at working with an advisor and a mentor. People sometimes ask me, how early do you need to work with an advisor? And I would say, as early as you can. A 30 minutes conversation with an advisor and a mentor can really move you forward much quicker than you think. And this is one of the reasons why I join accelerators and offer my time. And I also run my own sessions. Every month I do a one-to-one session on just to mentor startups, especially on the tech and the product aspects. And I've also starting running workshops where for a couple of hours, we jump in there and we really hands-on. It's not a webinar, it's not a podcast, hands-on working with startup to give them the tools to move forward. And I can tell you that sometimes when I leave a session, it could be that I've done 5 or 6 sessions in one day back to back. My head is full of ideas and it's long, many hours online, but I have so much energy because of how I see people that are coming in there and says, look, Naily, I've got this. I've been working on this for so long and I've finally managed to build this, but I'm not sure how to do the next thing. And just working with them, respecting them that they are expert in their areas and I'm bringing another level of expertise, just seeing that breakthrough moment is so gratifying, and it makes all of the hours, number of hours on Zoom so worth it. And if you want to go a step further, you can also start considering bringing fractional. So I do fractional CPO, CTO, fractional leads of teams. And the best way for me to describe that is bridging the gap between the development team and the leadership team so that I can translate the messaging, the project, the strategy, and really get people motivating and focused, especially so that the founders can go and do the other thing that they need to do to grow the business. And they know that everything else that is happening is really happening. To finish off, and I wouldn't do justice, not just for me, but for all of the advisors out there, I wanted to share some best key practices when working with advisors. And of course, I've been really excited, especially when I work with Founder Institute. All of the mentors that come to my sessions are always prepared. They know exactly what they want to get. They send me materials early on. They send me the questions early on, or even at the session. It's very clear. I've worked with other founders, of course, I'm not going to name anybody, but I've been sometimes, whether it's a free or a paid sessions, I've seen people who do not appreciate the value that mentors can bring to them. And I think it's really important that you really change your mindset when it comes to mentors. Even if working with someone for free, I offered my time for free for a founder who was hangover and in bed. Now, there is nothing wrong with working in bed as long as you're sitting upright, even if it's cold, you want to be warm. I don't care about those details. But when you obviously hangover in bed, not even trying to sit up, just splurring on and talking about random things, and I didn't even know what I was doing there. And I felt like I just lost my time for that. And if you think about that, when you work with an advisor, it's not just my time and my knowledge that you are getting, my knowledge and experience of many years, but it's also the contacts that the advisors that we have. I run a podcast, the ecosystem that I have. You have a question, I will know who to call. Says, by the way, you need to speak to that person that will get you to another level. So when you're working with an advisor, bear in mind that you are getting into that network, going back to not struggling alone, making sure that if you are struggling in an area, even if it's not the area where the advisor is an expert on, ask them, who else do they have on their network that can help? And one of my biggest secrets for working well with advisor is thinking about how to onboard them. As you might know, you might not stay with the same advisor for the entire life of your startup, right? Maybe you work with them for a year, 2 years, a bit less, depending on what you need. And you might also have advisors based on different strengths and different areas of your startup. If you don't have the basics of knowing where your pitch deck is, your one pager, your what is it, lean canva, your business plan or business model, whatever it is, those basic informations, where are they, so that if someone new come into your company and want to get a high level view, you can send them just one link. The amount of time founders spend on going into different folders and finding all this information and sending one by one to different advisors, it's tiring. So the best advisor, and sometimes I always mention that to people, they come to a session, they have so much they want to talk to me about, and I says, do you know what? Before next session, just do a high level diagram, put it in a folder, put your pitch deck there if you have one. If not, just give me some basic information. Send me the link so that I can absorb some of what you are doing, so that when we come in our sessions, it's a lot more powerful. So if you're going to work with 4, 5, 6 plus advisors over the course of a year, imagine how much time you are saving and how much more powerful your session will be with them if you follow that advice. If you have any other question on building a platform, on early stages, or on pre-seed, seed, or whatever stage you are, but if you are struggling with any tech products and tech leadership related, then remember that we run a one-to-one free mentoring session at the end of the month, and we are also having various workshops, especially to help with product validation and beyond. Do reach out to me on whatever platform, and I'll be more than happy to help. In the meantime, do remember, dream, build, play. Let's design a happy and productive workplace playground together.